Where's my shoe? I need to put my shoes on. I feel naked without my shoe.
I think we are live on Facebook, just as an FYI.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. We are just starting the streaming of our webinar now. We are going to give it a few minutes for some folks to join us, and then we'll be beginning. Thank you all. Good evening, everybody. We are just about to begin. It's 5:32. I think I'm going to give us one more minute for folks to join. Folks are joining on Facebook, YouTube, and here within the Zoom. So going to give it one more minute and then going to commence the interactive webinar. Okay, everybody, we're going to begin. Good afternoon. I'm Atwal Pinder, and I'm working as the Recovery Coordinator for the United Nations Development Program here in the Bahamas. As a little bit of background information, UNDP has been working in many areas in the now 16 plus months since Dorian impacted both Grand Bahama and the Abacos. But one of the most harsh realities of Dorian was the destruction of such a large proportion of our buildings. During assessments that were made post-hurricane, it became clear that those homes which had been built to code fared much better than those who had not been built to code. And the Bahamas has one of the most progressive building codes in the region, but Dorian really showed how there's a need for everybody to understand how to meet those standards that we have. And that led to the Ministry of Public Works creating the Guide to Housing Standards from the Bahamas, which is easily available online to be downloaded as a PDF. I'll put the link into the chat. It's a really easy to follow, even for somebody like me who is not technical in this area, guide to the building code of the Bahamas. And we feel it helps all homeowners in making sure that their homes are hurricane resilient. Additionally, one of the other things that came out was that homes that have not been regularly maintained additionally were much more likely to have received severe impacts as a result of Dorian. So that's what this today's webinar on Build Smarter is going to be focusing on, is hurricane readiness and hurricane home inspections and maintenance schedules. So as part of that work that's really about how do we as Bahamians ensure, and others in the region, if they're able to tune in, are able to be living in hurricane resilient homes. I have two fellow Bahamians here, Nick Sims and Eugene Thompson, that were originally hired to lead our technical assistance centers in Grand Bahama and in Abaco, which was being done in conjunction with the DRA Small Home Repair Program and Rotary Clubs of the Bahamas. COVID, of course, as we all know, has thrown a little wrench in almost everybody's plans over the last year. And that was one of the things. So we have moved to this more virtual format in order to be able to provide technical guidance to homeowners, contractors, subcontractors, anybody throughout the country. Nick Sims is a licensed professional structural engineer with 26 years of experience in the Bahamas, and he spent 17 years in Abaco. So is super familiar with all the various keys and the different types of construction going on. And Eugene Thompson is an architectural technician, and as somebody who actually grew up in Grand Bahama, he has over 30 years of experience along the length and breadth of that island. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information on how this evening's session is going to work. Nick and Eugene are going to do a presentation that you can see displayed here on this screen that's going to go over the key points related to why maintenance of your home is important in readiness of a hurricane, the best time to do it, and the best ways to do it. At any point during the presentation where you would like to ask a question, you can either raise your hand virtually. You'll see next to your name in the participant list, there's a little hand, just click on that. And I can unmute you so that you can ask a question. Otherwise, you can type right into the area that says Q&A, and you'll be able to ask a question there. If you're on Facebook, please just write your comments there. I'm monitoring that feed as well, and I will relay those questions here to our experts, John and Nick. And then at the end of today's session, I am going to have a quick poll for you just to ask, your thoughts on how the session went, and also if you'd like to receive a copy of the manual, I'm going to share a way for you to do that. So I think based on that, Eugene, I believe you are going to be the one leading this evening's session, so I'm going to have you start.
Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the Build Smarter webinar series. Thank you for finding the time to take part in this training series. The intent of this training series is to provide an easy-to-follow, condensed presentation of the requirements of the Bahamas Building Code, the guidelines in the Guide to Housing Standards, the Build Back Better manual, as well as best building practices to help builders as well as homeowners in Abaco and Grand Bahama rebuild their homes so they are hurricane resilient. The Build Back Better manual was developed post-Dorian and is a Ministry of Works document drawn from the Bahamas Building Code and developed in collaboration with United Nations Development Program Jamaica Office, the University of the Bahamas, and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority. This afternoon's training, as Etwal said, is focused on inspecting and maintaining your home as it relates to the always ongoing and necessary process in the Bahamas of being prepared for hurricanes. Why is home maintenance important for being prepared for hurricanes? Because evidence seen in the aftermath of hurricane strikes show that lack of home maintenance is a significant contributing factor to damages to homes by hurricanes. This only stands to reason. Your home's resilience to hurricane relies on, first and foremost, the robustness and integrity of the structure. Second, soundness of the exterior weatherproofing finish, which includes such things as the roof cladding, the wall cladding of timber-framed houses, and the windows and doors. Third, the soundness of any hurricane shutters you may have fashioned for windows and doors. The Bahamian environment is hot and humid. The atmosphere is salt-laden, and we are in a hurricane zone, an active hurricane zone, I might add. Altogether, this is one of the toughest environments around in which to not only design and build a home, but also maintain it to a high standard so that it retains its resilience to hurricanes. This is the challenge that must be met. Let's take a look at inspection and maintenance guidelines. Scheduling of inspections. Perform a regular inspection of your home at least once per year, as well as after any significant weather event. Schedule the regular inspection so that if any maintenance and repair work that needs to be done is detected, there is an adequate amount of time to schedule and complete the works. For instance, hurricane season here in the Bahamas and worldwide runs from June 1st to November 30th each year. Taking into account the holiday and Ajonkanoo season, a good time to schedule a regular inspection is the second week of January, which leaves almost 6 months before the start of the hurricane season to perform any repairs or maintenance that may be needed. Structural inspections and maintenance. The structure of your home is the most important element for keeping you safe from a hurricane. The compromise of a single structural element can significantly increase the risk of damage from a hurricane and threat to the occupants. An example of this would be a single rotted or termite-ridden sheet of plywood roofing that fails during high hurricane wind loading. This would allow winds to pass through the exterior envelope and to enter the interior space of the roof and the home, causing further damage and destruction. Structural items to check includes, for concrete homes, look for cracks in the concrete walls and the concrete floor slab. A common cause of cracking in concrete structural elements is the rusting of the entombed steel reinforcement. When steel rusts, it expands in volume. This creates additional internal stresses in the concrete, which can eventually cause it to crack. The crack then allows moisture and air to get to the reinforcing steel, which subsequently accelerates the rusting, the expansion of the steel, and more and larger cracking. Cracking reduces the integrity of the structure, and if left unchecked, will continue to advance until the structure is at risk of failure, especially when loaded with the strong wind and/or water surge forces brought to bear on the home during a hurricane strike. This slide shows vivid photos of corroded rebar in reinforced concrete. As you look at the examples, they show columns, they show beams, they show walls where there are obvious signs of corrosion to the point of the integrity of the structural member being at risk of failure. These are clear signs that you can see even before it gets to this point, that you can see that something is going on that needs to be addressed structurally. Next slide. This shows the process of corrosion of embedded rebar in concrete. As we look at the slide from left to right, it shows the gradual process. First part on the left, it shows moisture enters hairline cracks and porous areas. Next, as we go across to the right, you would see that rust begins to form. Then there's a heavy buildup of bulky corrosion products causing disruptive tensile stresses. And all the way over to the right, we see final pressure causes spalling of concrete and exposure of steel bars. And we tend to look for, you'll be able to really see this when there are chunks of concrete that begin to fall or small pieces. That is when it's at the critical stage, and that is what the spalling is all about, as shown here. Next slide. We look for indications of settlement of the concrete floor slab. Indications of settlement of the floor slab include noticeable dips or depressions forming over time, normally accompanied by cracking, gaps opening up at the top or bottom of interior walls, cracking in interior walls, doors that do not swing freely or close properly anymore, gaps opening up where cabinets sit on the floor, and persistent and disruptive issues with plumbing supply or drain lines. The primary cause of slab settlement in the Bahamas is poor quality limestone fill that was not placed and compacted as required by code. And again, here are some vivid photographs of cracked concrete slabs. If you are able to identify any of these in your home, please consult with a licensed architect or engineer if any cracks or settlement of your home is found or suspected. Ensure you confirm the credentials of the building professional you consult. Okay, our structural engineer, Nick Sims, will continue on from here.
I think just before we get into timber, I just wanted to check and see if any of the participants had any questions about all of those kind of terrifying things that we just saw there with the rusting rebar leading to the cement cracking off, or seeing, and I mean, I definitely have been in homes where I've seen those cracks appearing. So does anybody have any questions about your home or things to do if you've seen any of that in your concrete structures? Either just raise your hand here and I can see you, or feel free to write in the question and answers. And if not, Nick, then I'll move on to the timber framed homes and timber framed roofs. Okay, everybody looks good. We'll go on to you then, Nick. Sorry about that.
Okay. Good evening, all. So we're going to talk about timber frame homes now and timber roofs. So for timber frame homes, as well as homes with timber frame roofs, you want to look for signs of rot or termite damage in any of the structural timber elements, including things like the plywood sheathing. Timber, even pressure-treated timber, will rot when it's subjected to consistently moist or wet conditions. Wood loses its structural integrity when it rots. Evidence of rotting wood include material that is soft and spongy and sometimes moist to the touch. It is usually darkened and it has mold or mildew growing on it. And it usually has a dank, musty smell. Pressure-treated lumber does a good job of repelling termites. However, the use of non-pressure treated wood, in particular non-pressure treated plywood, especially for roofs, is unfortunately commonplace. Non-pressure treated lumber is vulnerable to termites, which obviously consumes the lumber. This reduces the structural integrity of the lumber. Evidence of termite presence include brittle earthen tubes, commonly seen on the exterior walls of homes, which the termites use as transportation routes, or small mounds of tiny spherical pellets, which are the excrement from their consumption of the wood, and wood members that are riddled with holes and tubes. Investigate the entire home for signs of termite presence, and investigate all visible timber members for signs of termite damage, including the foundation piles, any timber foundation piles, the plywood sheathing of walls and the roof, the framing members of the roof, the rafters, the bottom cords, and the webs. Homes that have timber frame roofs will typically have, homes that have timber frame floors will typically have a crawl space under the floor that can usually be used to inspect the framing for any rot or termite damage and any signs of settlement. Look for the same evidence that is associated with sinking concrete floors with respect to settlement of timber floors, but not including cracking of concrete. However, tiles are often used to finish timber frame floors and will crack if the timber floor is settling. So in this photo here, in this slide here, we see various photos of timber that's in various states of rot and degradation. This includes floor beams, floor joists, plywood upon the floor joists, and just different framing members coming together. And you'll notice there's a lot of rot that it tends to occur where there's joints between frame members, because those are the areas that tend, if they do get wet, they tend to maintain the moisture in those locations, which contributes to any rotting that would occur. Next slide, please. These are the two photos of the telltale signs of subterranean termites. So they, as their name suggests, they tend to live underground, and they need these tubes to maintain, so that they can safely travel back and forth from their homes to the source of wood that they will consume and eat. Next slide, please. These are two photos showing typical termite droppings. As you can see, they're small, they're spherical, they tend to be mounded together in one particular location, and they tend to be close to where there's very obvious signs of degradation of the wood. Next slide, please. And these are a couple photos showing wood that has been attacked and partially consumed by termites. As you can see, it's just riddled with holes and tubes, and particularly the I think that's a bottom chord of a truss on the right hand, on the right photo there. And you can see it's completely lost any structural integrity due to being consumed by termites. So if you do see any or suspect any termite damage, presence, you want to consult with a licensed and professionally trained termite exterminator. You want to ensure the credentials of the exterminator, because the chemicals commonly used to eradicate termites are hazardous, and they must be handled properly and professionally to safeguard your health as the occupant of the home. Next slide, please. Okay. Where possible, inspect all joints and connections of wood members. I think I got ahead of myself. Go back there, Etoile, please. Right, thanks. Where possible, inspect all joints and connections of wood members. For example, in the roof space, examine the connections of the webs to top and bottom chords of the trusses for soundness. In other words, the joint is tightly held and there's no rusting of fasteners. Also, while you're in the roof space, you can easily see the underside of roofing plywood, and you want to look for any signs of rot or termite presence. A critical joint to inspect, is the connection of the trusses to the top of the walls, whether it be the top timber plate bolted to concrete tie beams in concrete homes, or the top two timber wall plates of a timber frame wall. You want to look for soundness and any rusting of the hurricane clips and nails which connect the roof structure to the supporting wall structure. The crawl space under timber frame floors, as I've already said, can often be used to inspect the joints and connections of the floor framing. And again, you want to consult with licensed and professional builders if any joints and connections require repairs or maintenance. Next slide. So we're going to talk about the weatherproofing of the home now. The primary function of exterior cladding and windows and doors of your home is to help create a barrier to wind and water. These components are vital and work with the integrity of the home structure to provide an overall secure, safe, dry, and comfortable interior space for your family. Poorly maintained exterior cladding elements can cause or reduce the structural integrity of the home. For example, leaks over a long period of time through a roof in disrepair can result in rot of interior wood structural members. For this reason, your inspection and maintenance program must take into account the exterior cladding elements of your home as well. Next slide, please. So you want to inspect your roof finish for any signs of deterioration or damage. Roof finishes include such things as the asphalt shingles or metal roofing that's on the exterior surface of the roof. Any damaged roof finishes can lead to persistent leaks. Roofing has a limited lifespan, dependent on the quality of the material used, and the manufacturer recommends the lifespan of that material. Replace the roof when its lifespan is up. You also want to inspect the fascia and soffits of the roof for any signs of rot, termite damage, or connections that are not sound. Fascia and soffits that are not sound can fail during a hurricane and be an access point for hurricane winds to enter the interior of the roof and home. So in this slide here, we see two photos. On the left there, you see the fascia and the soffit identified. The soffit is the underside of the edge of the roof where it returns to the exterior of the wall. The fascia fronts that area there. And then you have a fascia called the barge board that follows the rake of the roof. And on the right-hand side, you see an example, a very clear example of a failed section of soffit. So you can easily see here is a open access point for strong winds to enter into that home, enter into that roof structure, and possibly do quite a bit of damage when it does so. Next slide, please. If you have a timber home, the exterior walls typically will be clad with siding, which is then caulked and painted. And that siding is either typically wood, or it's a cement composite material like hardy siding. You want to inspect your siding for any signs of deterioration, damage, rot, or termite attack, and plan to repaint your home every 5 years and inspect the caulking of your siding every year. The paint protects your siding, as does the caulking, and the caulking seals the edges of the ends and joints of the siding to keep rain and wind out. The caulking and paint help protect the siding from rain. Failing caulk and paint can allow siding to get wet, and left unattended over time can lead to failure of siding at those locations. Next slide, please. The walls of concrete homes are typically finished with cement plaster that is then painted. Inspect your walls regularly for cracks in the plaster finish, or even delamination of the plaster pulling away from the masonry block walls. And plan to repaint your home again every 5 years. Doesn't matter whether it's siding for a timber home or plaster, masonry plaster in your concrete home. Or when the paint looks faded and maybe flaking and peeling. Also, regularly inspect your windows and exterior doors for signs of deterioration or damage. Check the operation of windows and doors to ensure they close snugly and are able to lock and be secured. Windows and doors that do not close snugly and cannot be secured are access points for the strong winds of hurricanes. Inspect the fitting of the windows and doors to the structure. Windows and doors typically are attached to the structure of the home with screws that are fixed through the frame of the windows and doors and then into the structure of the home. A bead of caulking is typically then run around the joint between the window and door to seal it off and prevent water from getting into the home. Over time, screws can corrode, particularly if they are not hot dip galvanized or stainless steel. And if left unchecked, the corrosion can eventually deteriorate the screw to the point that it can fail, particularly under wind loads from hurricanes. The caulking around windows and doors must be checked regularly and will need to be replaced whenever it deteriorates. Cracks and splits in the caulking, as well as feeling hard and brittle to the touch, are telltale signs of caulking that needs to be replaced. Next slide, please. If you have hurricane shutters for your windows and doors, as well as covers for your roof whirlybirds, ensure all are in good condition and operable long before the start of the hurricane season. Take the time to fit the shutters and covers to check soundness and ease of fit and operation. Make a key to identify which shutter goes on which window and door, because this will save lots of time when installing in preparation for an actual hurricane. Keep metal connectors and fittings of shutters well protected with anti-corrosion lubricant. If you are able and competent enough to perform any repairs and maintenance that are needed, do so as soon as possible. For repairs you may not feel up to doing, consult with a licensed and professional builder, and make sure to have all work completed long before the start of the hurricane season. Next slide, please. So owning a home in the Bahamas carries a considerable personal responsibility to the committed caring for your home so that it has the best chance of being safely and securely occupied by your family during a hurricane strike. A regular inspection and maintenance program is vital to ensure your home is always prepared to meet the challenge of the inevitable hurricane strike, and it goes a long way to protecting your family as well as your investment. So that's our presentation for this evening, and that opens it up to any questions that anybody may have.
So Nick, Eugene, we have a written question here from Andre Moss. Andre, I have allowed, if you want to unmute and actually respond, I'm going to start reading your question, but then feel free to unmute yourself and discuss with Nick and Eugene. But he says, and it's definitely something I'm interested in too, is it any long-term benefit to use the tent to fumigate your home prior to moving in? So you've bought a new home, say, does it make sense to fumigate before that? Or is there a time period, or would you only do it if you are already seeing the signs of termites? And he also says, good job, Nick.
So I guess if you have money to spare, it's not a bad idea. Termites make their presence pretty readily known pretty quickly. So if you're vigilant in your checks and just being observant, you'll know pretty quickly if you have termites. And tenting is also quite expensive, and it is disruptive because you have to leave the home, and you'll be gone for 2, 3, 4 days. It depends on the company you use and the process that's comes into play. I can't really argue against it, but know that it is costly and disruptive to tent, and not always necessary. If you are vigilant in your observations, you can usually catch termites when they first start to invade your home. And a lot of times they can be stopped in their tracks with localized treatment rather than a full entombment with a tent fumigation.
And that was actually, so Nick, it's not a written question, but it's definitely something that I had been told, and it's good to hear that. So at my grandparents' house, we had sort of the termites were beginning, and that's what we were recommended to do, was to do the point and click of the whatever localized, I guess, termites. So that's just as effective if you can tell it's just new and starting in one spot.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Okay, Andre.
Good seeing you again, bro.
Yeah, man.
And Mr. Bruno has also written, though, which is good, was that, which is a really good point, is that if you're buying a home that's new to you, you can actually hire a termite inspector who could do maybe some of those things you were talking about, Nick, like crawling into the ceiling space or the under the timber floor. You may not be up for that, so you can hire an inspector to do that.
Anybody who's buying a home that is already built, I strongly recommend that you get a licensed professional, some sort of building professional, whether it's an architect or engineer or builder, to perform a home inspection for you. He can, that person can save you a lot of heartache and costs, and it's just very useful. It's money well spent.
Right.
Agreed. Even before you negotiate the price of the house.
Correct.
Guys.
Right. So prior to the purchase as opposed to prior to the moving in, this is the important thing to do.
Yeah.
Got it. And then also, does anybody else have a question? You can raise your hand and I will unmute you, or feel free to write it in the Q&A. This is your chance to talk to our architectural technician and structural engineer about any burning questions you might have. Okay, Sean says, why paint at 5-year intervals when hot weather seems to be so much worse? I think that the impact of the hot weather could be that much worse. And Sean, you can feel free to chat if you want to.
Paint, there is a vast range of quality of paint, and that is also associated with the cost of the paint. But paint ranges from really, really good paint to paint that you really should not be using to paint the outside of your home with. But of course, the really, really good paint is quite expensive. 5 years is about what my experience in the Bahamas tells me, that you should plan to paint for your home every 5 years. However, as we discussed in the presentation, you should also look to paint your home if you see where your paint is fading or failing or peeling, and that can happen before 5 years. Paint will also take quite a beating during an actual hurricane, and you may need to repaint your home. One of the common repairs that occurs after a hurricane strike is the need to repaint a home. So 5 years is just a useful interval that's based on my experience over almost 30 years now, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And really it's all about you paying attention to your home and being observant. And if you see your home needs repainting, go ahead and repaint it.
All right, thank you. But there are a lot of paints out there. So I mean, what do we look for in the paint, and do we seal the concrete, the browning, the finish? Is it necessary to seal that before we paint?
You want to talk to your paint professional. They're depending on the store that you go to. Want to discuss those sorts of things with the folks that are selling you the paint. I would recommend that you stick to the paint merchants that have a long history. Benjamin Moore comes to mind. Sherwin-Williams comes to mind. These are paint companies that have been around for 100 years, and they're constantly innovating and producing new products. So they will advise you correctly on what paints to use and what levels of protection you will get with the different grades of paint that they will have to offer you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean. And then also, Mr. Simonet, I don't know if you want to unmute, but if you do, I think he's asked a question, Nick and Eugene, that we know is sort of being questioned since Dorian, which I feel you're going to have a positive response to. But the question is properly designed timber construction a go or now a no-go post-Dorian?
So in terms of dealing with wind, timber construction is fine. As an example, as a personal example, my home in Abaco was a timber home, and it did very well during Dorian. And it probably survived wind gusts of 250 miles an hour. Where my home was located, because it was on top of a hill. So a properly designed timber construction is more than adequate to resist the winds of a hurricane. Now that changes somewhat if you're in a location where you're subject to flooding. If you are subject to flooding, flooding can bring with it boats and large pieces of material that is being dragged along in the surge, and can cause more damage to a timber home through the blow that can happen versus a masonry home or concrete home. So it's sort of you want to design and build the strongest and best home that you can for the location that you're at. So you kind of have to know what you are probably going to experience during a really, really strong hurricane. If it's just winds, timber's fine. If it's winds and a potential strong surge, deep surge, my suggestion would be to go with masonry.
The key there is still properly designed.
Properly designed.
Even the masonry has to be properly designed.
Designed and built.
And built, correct.
And I did because Mr. Seminette brought up a question that is specific for building, do highly recommend you've got a couple of options out there. I did put in the link here to the chat for the Build Back Better Guide to the Housing Standards of the Bahamas, also the UNDP Multi-Country Office. On Facebook, we've got links, and on our YouTube channel, all of the previous webinars that Nick and Eugene have been holding in conjunction with, like I said, Mr. Bruno, and I see Mr. Delancey here from Public Works are on. So all of them have been providing input on building your home. So foundations, timber wall framing, timber roof framing, and masonry construction, and then roofing. They've all been covered, and I definitely, if you're a homeowner as opposed to a contractor, like me, I knew really nothing about what I needed to be paying attention to before I started this process, and it's been incredibly helpful to me. And so definitely highly recommend, check them out. Facebook, you can just put in UNDP Multi-Country Office and it'll pop up, same on YouTube. And there's a lot of good information out there. The other thing that's been a common thread throughout all of this is talk to a professional if you're not a professional yourself. And I think that's been an important lesson learned by me. Does anybody else have any other questions? Feel free, raise your hand or write it in the Q&A. No. Okay. So I'm going to do, I know some people have already left, but if you could just quickly answer the poll, it'd be really good just to help us know what additional information people are looking for, how it met your needs, your questions. And then at the end, when the webinar ends, you'll see there's just going to be an open-ended question asking if you want additional information. If you do, you can either put in your WhatsApp number or your email address. They will come to me, and then I can write to you, send you links, send you PDFs, send you movie clips, all the different things from previous trainings and additional information, all about ensuring that we are living in hurricane resilient homes here in the Bahamas, which is both Eugene and Nick made very clear. We are in one of the most challenging environments. That's literally what they call us on all of the structural engineering scales when they talk about the fact that we have the high salt content and our high winds and storm surge propensity. So please do let me know if you want any additional information, and thank you all so much for joining. Nick, not sure if you or Eugene have any parting words.
No, just thanks for taking part, showing up today, and
Same here.
Perfect. Okay, everybody. Oh, Mr. Delancey. Sorry. Yes, let me. Mr. Delancey, please.
Good afternoon. No, I just wanted to express my thanks to you, Mrs. Pinder, for all you've done in putting together and sponsoring through the UNDP these webinars and the booklet that has been produced. And also want to say thanks to Mr. Sims and Thompson for your input and the work you're doing in trying to assist local communities in ensuring that their homes are put back together or restructured to code. As we are all aware that that is one of the areas that we've been falling down in as home builders and building contractors, in ensuring that we are building in compliance to the building code. And so I just wanted to express my thanks to all of you for all the webinars and the time you've taken into putting it together.
thank you.
Thank you for your assistance as well.
Thank you, Mr. Delancey. And just as a final note, just to say that it is being Mr. Delancey and Mr. Bruno from the Ministry of Public Works have both been nonstop in the work, trying to make it more easily accessible, the knowledge and understanding of what's required. And for any of you who do happen to be in Abaco, I wanted to just bring up, I should have said it at the beginning, but there's a cool model timber frame wall, timber frame roof structure now at the old BAIC part. You know, just across from where the old Premier was, and now there's a coffee shop in it, in the auto parts place. If you look on the other side of the road, you'll see a timber framed structure there. And this is one that is being built to code. It shows you all the key things. We're going to be getting some laminated signs to go up on it as well, to ensure that if you're a homeowner, you can go and understand what everything should look like. See what pressure treated plywood should look like, and make sure that that's what your contractors are using. Or if you're a contractor or a subcontractor and you just want to refresh yourself, then that building is available there. And on that note, then I'm just going to say good evening, everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good job.
Good night.